May only your word be spoken, and may only your word be heard. Amen. And have a seat, please. After the events of the day before, which are literally the day before, and not like us the week before when they were the gospel lesson of the day, the disciples were out there fishing, doing what they knew how to do on the water. And Jesus had sent them out to do that. And then came this wonderful scriptural lesson that is one that's known and loved by so many people about Jesus commanding Peter to come walk on the water. And there are, I'll bet in many of our minds, very graphic visual images of what it probably looked like. Not many scriptural lessons actually lend themselves to that. But it's easy to sort of see this one, visually see this one. First time I went to the Sea of Galilee, about 32 years ago, I took off my shoes, rolled up my pants legs, got in up to my knees. Didn't work. And it was February and it was cold, but I'd come quarter way around the world and I was not going to fail to try. And so this story is such a real one. It's one of the ones that people know about. And it was a stormy, foggy morning like they get on the Sea of Galilee. Those of us who've gone down to the sea in ships know about storms. And if you've been to the Sea of Galilee, it's not like an open water like, say, the James River or the York River, where the land is level on both sides. The Sea of Galilee is in a great depression in the earth. Sea of Galilee is 696 feet below sea level. And so the hills come down very steeply, which means the wind blows down steeply onto the water and kicks it up. And it can get very nasty in a hurry. And it can also calm down in a hurry if the wind stops. So there they were, out on the Sea of Galilee. And they were the disciples. And the disciples had much history with Jesus. Remember, Jesus had selected them, one by one, from fishing in the nearby waters, for they were mostly fishermen living near the north coast of the Sea of Galilee, which is where the feeding of the 5,000 at the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee had happened in last week's lesson. And after Jesus had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the hill to pray, and all of this is in a very close proximity. They're kind of home. They're with Jesus, who one might think they would recognize because he had recruited them. And not much more than 12 hours prior, he had had them assisting him in the feeding of the 5,000 on the shore that was just sort of right over there. One might think they would recognize Jesus. But look what happens in this story. The first thing that happens is they see him on the water in the middle of the storm, and they say, "It is a ghost." They don't recognize him. "It is a ghost," to which he says simply, "It is I." You can almost hear the parenthesis in his voice saying, "How come you don't recognize me? It is I." Peter tests him. "If it is you, command me to come out in the water." Jesus says, "Come." Peter starts to fail. Jesus takes him by the hand and rescues him. And at the end of this very quick exchange comes the very last line of the scripture lesson. All in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." A rather involved and complicated process to recognize someone who they knew so well and had spent all this time with, and very recently, recognizing the teacher who had taught them, recognizing the teacher through a complicated and involved process that seems, frankly, to make no sense. But there it is. Here we are 2,000 plus years later, 2,000 or so years later. And many of us have gone through complicated processes of recognizing the Lord. Through teaching, through listening to sermons in churches, through reading, very complicated this whole vocation of coming to recognizing the Lord and become a Christian person. It is not an easy thing to do, but it's involved recognizing the teacher by recognizing the teaching. And many don't, frankly, succeed at that. And here we are at Hickory Neck Church, where the teacher left a few weeks ago, and the other teacher went to England for a couple of weeks and said, "Hey, Ted, how about this?" And there is an activity starting now of finding the new teacher. Canon Spear-Jones will be here next week to talk about that at some length, because it is an involved process of finding the new teacher, who you will also call the rector. Will that person be obvious? Jesus should have been obvious, and he wasn't. Will the selection of the new teacher for this church be obvious? Or will it be confusing, like the ghost who appears out of the fog walking on the water and isn't immediately recognized? This is all called discernment. You're going to hear that word a lot, I think, in the next months to come. And it is hard work. Just understand that up front. Discernment is hard work. Maybe there are going to be some ghosts. Maybe there are going to be some out there who need to be identified because they're not easily identified. Maybe there are going to be tests of various kinds that have to be run. Maybe there are going to be some false starts that don't work out. Discernment is a complicated and involved process. There's lots to do to get ready for discernment, and there's lots to do to doing it. And the longer you do it, just so you know, the easier it will be toward the end. It may not seem that way along the way, but the easier it'll be toward the end. When the people are ready, the teacher will come. It's what I found out in ministry after all these many, many years. If the people are ready and you show up as the teacher, it works so beautifully. But that involves getting ready. And getting ready involves learning how to recognize. The disciples were not very good at recognizing. So spend some effort learning how to recognize. And it will involve learning how to welcome. This congregation's very good at welcoming. But learn how to welcome and how to support and participate in the ministry that new priest is going to bring here, and to proclaim the Lord together and live out the kingdom together, walking down the pilgrim's road together. When all is ready and all the homework has been done and all the complication has been done, there will be only 2 questions left, which is easy. The first question will be, do you value what we value? We spent a lot of time figuring out what we value. It's not easy. But do you value what we value? And if you value what we value, would you like to walk the Pilgrim's Road with us? It gets that easy at the end, but it's not easy at the beginning. And the symbol that it is not easy at the beginning is that as familiar as these disciples were with Jesus, who was their teacher, they saw him in the morning on the water and said, "It is a ghost." It was not a ghost. I don't think they believed in ghosts. But it is a ghost. It is a confusing thing. That priest who comes here someday will not walk on the water. And I'm saying that not as a literal thing, but as a metaphor. That priest will not walk on the water. That priest will be a humanoid, kind of like the rest of us, and will have things to do and have gone through experiences who will want to talk about them. And what do those experiences look like? I take you back to the second lesson for today, which speaks to me as a priest, and it speaks to me about what life has been like over these years. And it's so wonderful that it popped up in the lesson cycle for the day. How are they to call on the one whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in the one whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone to proclaim him? And how are they to proclaim him unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. There is someone out there who is going to bring you good news. You don't know who he is. I don't know who he is. That person may not know who he is either. But discernment gets there. And it has about it this one magic word that is in that little lesson that I just read back to you from the second lesson, and that word is sent. People will sometimes ask me a question that I had wondered about for many, many years too, and that is, who are the disciples and who are the apostles? And the words seem to interchange sometimes, and people get sloppy and move from one to the other, and it's hard to tell what's true between disciples and apostles. So here is just something to understand and understand early. Jesus brought the 12 together, and they didn't recognize him, but they were disciples, and disciples live under a discipline, and people who are under a discipline of a teacher are learners. Disciples were there to learn from Jesus, and the learning was slow and difficult and hard and all that stuff, but they made it through all of that. And then after Jesus had died and risen and all of that happens, and the time comes for Jesus to ascend, the very last thing he says, and I'm going to give you a homework assignment to go read it. It's the last paragraph of the Gospel according to Matthew. It's called the Great Commission, and they are sent. Disciples are people who study and learn. Apostles are people who are sent. Not all disciples become apostles. But our church says about we ourselves that we are sent. And because we are sent, we are apostolic people. And I want to point out something to you which you yourselves will say in a few moments and let you understand the significance of it. Because if you understand the significance of it and what it means as a congregation to be sent, maybe you'll understand the significance of what it means when a priest comes to meet you someday and is sent. And that word is apostolic. First thing we're going to do as soon as I'm finished talking, any moment now, it's not that bad. Any moment now, we are going to stand and we're going to read the Nicene Creed. We do it every week. And in the last paragraph, it will say the church is four things. It is one, it is holy, it is apostolic, and Catholic. One holy, Catholic, apostolic church. Note the word apostolic. Apostolic means sent. The church is sent. The individual who will come to you someday to be your teacher is sent. Receive the one who is sent, and discernment of the many which one the right one is. Because to be together means to be apostolic together. To be sent together. One holy Catholic apostolic. Pay attention to the creed. If your mind goes in automatic every week and you just blast through the creed, pay attention to it this time. Because you will say about yourselves, we are sent. The priest will come. The teacher is out there. The teacher is coming. To that teacher, do you value what we value? And then, do you want to walk that pilgrim's path with us? And when all that happens, let the goodness of God be praised.